Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. After a long wait, Dan Povenmire's newest show, Hamster and Gretel, is finally out. You should hopefully recognize his name as one of the creators of Phineas and Ferb, as well as Milo Murphy's Law, Phineas and Ferb's underrated but really good follow-up. Like Milo, Hamster and Gretel is set in the same universe as Phineas and Ferb. Before the premiere, I didn't really watch too many clips about the show, so I'd go in as fresh as possible. So now I have the unenviable task of telling you my thoughts on the show's first episode. If you didn't know about the show beforehand, the new series is centered around a boy named Kevin and his younger sister Gretel, who, along with her hamster, simply called Hamster, have gained superpowers from an alien spaceship. Weird, right? This wouldn't be the first Povenmire show to start things off with a spaceship either. Milo was also visited by aliens in the first episode of his show too. He didn't get any powers though. From there, Kevin becomes their eye in the sky, advising them on how best to use their powers, all from his mother's minivan, which he is not too keen on doing at first, as his sister does not seem to listen to him at all, though he learns to roll with it by episode's end. Hamster and Gretel get right to being superheroes, saving a kitten from a well, and later facing off their own villain, Professor Exclamation, a clever play on Professor X. It's a very quick introduction that left me a little whiplashed, but it's also a simple enough premise, so it's probably forgivable. The thing I found interesting, if not a little bit annoying about this first episode, is it seems primed to deliver a lesson to Gretel about listening to her brother, and that not all of her problems can be solved with her fists, but that doesn't happen. Everything works out for her while leaving her brother getting drenched repeatedly. If any lesson is learned, it's from Kevin. First, about how he's a part of the team after all, he's the brains, and then that he needs to roll with the punches. I'm by no means claiming a cartoon must have moral lessons, but I did find it off-putting that Kevin gets the short end of the stick here. I'm hoping that it won't be as annoying in future episodes, and that if it does happen more, just let it be entertaining at least. It's reminding me a little bit about Candace in Phineas and Ferb, in that how she often got the short end of the stick. But at least with Candace, she was far more antagonistic in the show, in that she was always trying to bust her brothers. So you were usually kind of against her, because the brothers usually weren't doing anything that terrible. So, you know, you kind of argue it didn't make sense for her to always be trying to bust them for stuff. But with Kevin, he's trying to help them. He's not trying to bust them. So it kind of just seems kind of lame that he's getting the short end of the stick here. Luckily, I do still think the writing is top-notch. This is a damn Povenmire show, after all. All the little quirks you've come to know from Phineas and Ferb and Milo Murphy's Law are all here. The random humor, like flying saucer that talks, bestowing powers.
Powers unimaginable!
Ooh, like the power to fly?
Okay, I guess some of them are imaginable.
The odd villain messing around with his lighting.
This is a message for the... Wait, why is my face dark? I'm just gonna... No, that's the light for the backdrop.
Etc. Even if this first episode was not as amazing as the premieres of his other shows, it's still really good, I think, in general. Some highlights that I'd like to address is obviously the animation. It looks really great, even with non-action scenes. Like, it looks really good, in my opinion. Things have certainly improved a lot with Povenmire shows since the early days of Phineas and Ferb. The animation was good, with Milo Murphy, but this show seems even a step above that. And I hear the action scenes will be higher quality than both of those, so that's something to be excited about. Another highlight of the episode was when Gretel learns Hamster can talk.
Sense of romance.
Whatever. If anyone needs me, I'll be in my wheel.
Wait, you can talk?
It's been done a billion times before in other shows, what with a small animal talking suddenly with a deep voice, but it still makes me chuckle every time. I also think this scene here was funny too.
Wait, is that Fred?
Yes, now you and Hamster need to lift the shell and...
Say hi from me.
Gretel says hi. They need to lift the shell and...
Did she say hi back?
Gretel, you can have a whole conversation with her after we save the city!
I'm interested in some of the other characters we're introduced to in this episode, like Kevin's cousin Fred, and his potential love interest, Hiromi, who works at a comic shop. Fred seems like a really neat character, with their kind of blunt way of speaking and their no-nonsense attitude. And the design she has is very simple, yet I kind of like it. At first, this is probably going to sound silly, but I wasn't sure if Fred was supposed to be a girl or not. It took me looking it up to discover Fred is short for Winifred. I thought maybe Disney had included one of their first trans characters, but nope. Which is fine. Fred is still cool, regardless. Before we end things off, there's also the segment Okie Dokie, but everything I've said so far basically covers that part too. Basically, the Oak Tree, Gretel, and Bailey love is destroyed thanks to the former not listening to Kevin about how to tackle this asteroid coming down. That's where the lesson about not always using your fists might have come into play, but then it doesn't, because Gretel fixes a tree with glue. It's a really short part of the episode, as most of the episode is devoted to Empower Failure, where they get their superpowers. One thing to note is the end, where two other stranded motorists are given powers by an alien saucer too, but this time are told to strictly use it for evil. It's possible, like Milo Murphy's Law, that Hamster and Gretel may have an ongoing side story that runs through several episodes before becoming a major storyline. At least, that's what I'm assuming anyway. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now, while I did praise Fred's design a little bit earlier, I do think some of the other characters in the show seem lacking with their designs in general, especially titular characters like Gretel and the villain, Professor Exclamation. Gretel's cute and all, but at the same time I found her appearance a little boring. I don't know if I can put my finger on why, that's just my current impression. Both character designs seem like something you'd find in a fan animation, or one of those sites that let you make your own cartoon characters. That might be a little harsh, but that's how I felt. I think Hamster and Gretel is a fine show so far. It does have that special quality you find in Poppemeyer's other shows. It's humorous and well animated, and I'm intrigued by the dynamic between Kevin and his sister, and where that will go as the show continues. But whether or not it'll go on to be as great as those other shows, only time will tell. What did you think of the first episode of Hamster and Gretel? Let me know down in the comments below. That's it for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and take care. I didn't know much about Moon Girl going into Disney's latest superhero cartoon other than there used to be a Moon Boy, and there was a lot of talk surrounding the comic book years ago when it was published. Some good, some bad. With this new show, I mostly went in blind and cautiously optimistic after digging the opening theme to it months ago. I've only seen the first episode, Moon Girl Landing, but I had such a fun time watching it, I can't wait to see more from the show. Right off the bat, I just am in love with the visual style of this show. Bits of it remind me of shows like Rise or Big Hero 6, both of which had tons of style. Moon Girl, though, is bursting with it. From the way the characters are animated, to the general look and feel of the show, you can tell that a lot of effort and love was poured into making it. It also helps set it apart from any other Marvel cartoon Disney's done lately, or heck, any other cartoon currently out, in my opinion. I don't know if it's just the look of the show or the tone of its writing, but it gave me major early 2000s cartoon vibes. Like I'd been transported back to my youth and was home from school watching Static Shock on Kids WB. I think it's because of the down-to-earth, sort of street-level feel the show has, with Lunella stepping up to protect her home in the Lower East Side from not just an actual power-stealing supervillain, but also just assisting the people in general with everyday issues like cats and trees. I loved seeing that aspect of a superhero's role in their community. The big teams like Avengers or Guardians are great, but you rarely get to see the human side of what they do sometimes. Too busy with explosions and epic world-ending threats, honestly. Another thing that drew me to the show and its titular character is while she is depicted as being crazy smart, this first episode never really makes that obnoxious. Too many shows have a hard time finding a balance in having a genius character and still having them be likable and relatable. I believe that was one of my earlier complaints about Marvel's Spider-Man. They focused a lot on how smart Peter was to the detriment of his character. He was just too annoying. And that issue isn't really here. Lunella is smart, she knows she is, but she's not high on her own fumes about it. and she's still capable of making mistakes in a believable way. Lunella's dynamics with her various supporting cast was also really well written and interesting to watch. Her loving, supportive family, who runs a rolling rink. I didn't know those existed in 2023, but nice. Her new friend Casey, who helps her design her superhero outfit as well as grow her brand. And of course, Devil, the big red dinosaur. I love seeing, loving family units in shows like this. It's wholesome as hell, and it gives Lunella something worth fighting to protect. Casey, the new friend she makes, seems like she's going to be super annoying at first, or in her words.
I've been told I can be a bit much.
But she's actually a really fun character. There's a lot of ways to have a social media-centered character go awry, but the writers didn't fumble it in this episode. She's the emotional support pillar for Lunella, or one of them anyways, someone who knows her secret and can give her advice. Their budding friendship is really fun to watch in this episode, and I adore their interactions with each other, like when they make up after a fight and realize they just gave each other nicknames.
OMG! Do we have nicknames now?
I guess so.
It finally happened! I've been dreaming about this day!
And then there's Devil Dinosaur, who is a character I'm not that knowledgeable about, but he's basically like an overgrown pet, just with tons of razor-sharp teeth and a tail that can probably smash a car. He's voiced by legendary Fred Tatasciore, I think I butchered that one, I'm sorry, man, who has done a ton of different voices over the years, and he really nails it as Devil, even though he doesn't really speak. Devil and Lunella's relationship is entertaining to watch, seeing them quickly befriend each other, go through a rough patch, and then reunite to take down a villain. It's wholesome. So very wholesome, and at times it made me tear up a little. Not gonna lie. The only gripe I think I had with the episode was when Lunella was getting him to return to his own dimension. She can't seem to get him to leave, so she pretends she's sick of him and wants him gone. It's a scene you've seen a million times with other animal characters in movies and shows, and I just think it would have been cool to see something else used to get Devil to go back home. But that's a bit of a minor nitpick in an otherwise fantastic episode. And now I have to talk about Aftershock, the baddie of the episode, in more ways than one, am I right, fellas? Did anyone else catch her name? Miss Dillon. As in Max Dillon, aka Electro. I was wondering why they were using a new electric-themed villain and not maybe like a more recognizable one like Electro. But you know who this is based on? His daughter from the MC2 universe. That is such a deep pull, and it's really neat that they did that. I don't know if they're related here or if she's meant to be like a gender swap version of Max, but it's sweet to see her nonetheless. Aftershock is amazing in this episode. She's a serious threat to the community and Moon Girl, putting the hurt on even Devil in a rather heartbreaking moment. Dillon is sarcastic, full of herself, and she steals every scene she's in, which is ironic considering she's stealing power in this episode. I don't know what happens to her after the episode ends, but hopefully she returns to face our duo again because she was just fantastic in this episode. Something else to point out was the music. It's so damn good. There's, of course, the opening song and the music that plays during those little cards you see before and after commercial breaks, but what really captured my attention was the song played during Moon Girl and Devil's last fight with Aftershock. I'm familiar with cartoons doing songs, of course. I grew up with chase music in Scooby and the songs in Phineas and Ferb, but I don't think I've ever seen it utilized like this in a superhero cartoon, at least not that I recall. I'm hoping this is a recurring thing and not just for the premiere episode because it was amazing. This episode really shocked me by how good it ended up being. Pretty much every part of it was on point, from the writing, to the animation, to the music. Like I said earlier, it really evoked a lot of what I remember of older cartoons from my childhood. None of this edgy, overly cynical nonsense. Just a good, wholesome superhero cartoon where they take care of their own and put the hurt on bad guys. Maybe it was the art style, maybe it was the writing, I don't know, but it was a very comfortable vibe. If you're looking for some good old-fashioned cartoon fun, I would highly recommend watching Moon Girl, based at least on this first episode. I'll 100% be watching it again. And if you're interested in watching more videos like this one, consider subscribing or maybe even becoming a member to get some neat perks. Links to all that will be in the description below, including merch. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. There may be some spoilers in this review, so watch at your own peril. I don't know much about the cyberpunk genre, and I know even less about the game put out by CD Projekt Red, but I was assured no knowledge was needed to watch Studio Trigger's Edgerunners, and that turned out to be true. I'm sure there's Easter eggs hidden throughout the series' 10 episodes, but you definitely do not need to play the game, dealing with its bugs, in order to enjoy this anime. The show follows David, who, after experiencing a devastating loss, decides to join up with a cyberpunk crew after meeting the beautiful netrunner Lucy. He's a tough kid who throws himself into learning the ropes, befriending the people in his crew as he goes, even striking up a romance with the initially cold Lucy. In a way, the crew becomes his new family. Now, I wasn't sure if I would be into this show, but the plot really pulled me in and I got incredibly invested. By episode 2, I was in love with the show's characterizations and how the characters felt so real and relatable. Episode 2, where David and Lucy spend time on the moon, stands out as a really great moment that lets you peek behind the walls Lucy initially has up. It's such a sweet moment, coming from a show set in the same world as Cyberpunk 2077, which doesn't ever really reach this height. And the music near the end was so perfect. I was also impressed with the world building. Night City and its corruption were enthralling to learn about. Stuff like the trauma team passing over injured people if they weren't clients was chilling to watch. It's callous, and it's capitalism at its utter worst. Hell, even David's mom ultimately dies because she doesn't have the right package. Kinda shines a light on how our world can be sometimes, although Night City's is a much more extreme example. At least our ambulance drivers will actually pick you up. The show also does a really bang-up job of showing how advances in technology can lead to humans abandoning their humanity by adopting cybernetics into their bodies or automating things like cremation into an almost vending machine-type system. Despite the shine and polish of a world like Cyberpunk, deep down it's a horrible place to live in. I also really got attached to the characters in this show. They all stand out with great designs and personalities, like Lucy, Maine, or the resident lolly Rebecca. It's been a long time since I watched any anime that touched me as much as Edgerunners did. Seriously, I cannot praise this show enough. The show can be sweet and endearing one moment, then heart-wrenching in others. When certain characters died, it tugged at my heartstrings. These characters also weren't perfect. They had flaws. It made them feel more human. Ironic, given the world's setting and the use of cybernetic enhancements that ultimately took away people's humanity. Also, before I watched the show, I saw a lot of praise on Twitter for characters like Lucy, and I can honestly see why. While David is the main protagonist of the series, she's an amazing character in her own right. I really warmed up to her as the show progressed, going from a closed-off, cold character who sets up David to be captured by her crew, to someone you really want to see be happy in the end. I'd also be remiss if I didn't point out how hot she is. There's plenty of scenes of her nude, but they never really come off that fan servicey. They're just there, which is surprising for an anime. Although there certainly are some more typical fan service scenes in Edgerunners. Rebecca herself, while somewhat sticking out in the cyberpunk setting, is also a really fun character. She doesn't get too much screen time versus some other characters, which is a bit criminal, but every scene she's in, she manages to dominate. Which makes it all the more surprising that CD Projekt Red tried to vote her out of the show.
Was that CD Projekt Red first got the character design for Rebecca, and they were like, she's a lowly. Lowlies don't exist in Night City. It doesn't fit the Cyberpunk 2077 aesthetic. But Sugar was like, no, the lowly must stay.
Because apparently there aren't petite women in Night City or something. Luckily, Studio Trigger said she had to stay, and so we weren't robbed of her tiny outbursts.
It's your air boy. Work it over yourself, cheap ass!
In the show, she seems to have the hots for David, but unfortunately, he only has eyes for Lucy, and while I did root for the former couple, I couldn't help but feel for Rebecca. I don't think we got to know her well enough, all the more unfortunate given how the show ends. Honestly, she reminds me a bit of some old-school anime female characters, like the ones from Tenchi Muyo, as well as DC Comics' Harley Quinn, especially when this scene happens.
Let's run dry!
Got a little bitch ran out of juice! Suck her up!
And now here comes the big guns!
Going back to David, I really have to give Studio Trigger props with writing him. A problem that plagues a lot of anime is their bland, overpowered male protagonists, who can do whatever they want because they're special, and that's still here, of course, but never once did David come off as too overpowered, at least in my opinion. He still had limits like anyone else, just a higher tolerance. There was always the concern that he could be pushed over the edge into cyberpsychosis, which is what happens when you're more or less driven insane by having too much chrome, as they refer to it in the show. And even in the end, the show subverts that OP protagonist trend with how David's story concludes. He didn't win through the power of friendship, though he is momentarily brought back to his senses with a kiss. He just managed to give his friends enough time to escape, happy in the end to know that Lucy would go on living and follow her dream. Now, the show itself is also gorgeous to look at, with its beautiful expressive animation and the backdrop of the city itself. Night City gets brought to life in a way I don't even think the game manages to do. There's so many standout scenes in the show, I don't think I could even list them all. That's how great a job Trigger did this time around. The tech looks sleek, the people look nova, to borrow a term from the show, and the action is out of this world. I was always on the edge when shit went down, and I wanted to note that despite the show having plenty of gory scenes, it somehow wasn't really that disgusting. I don't really know how to explain it, because usually shots like these make my stomach turn at times, but the style is just exaggerated enough that's brutal, but not too brutal, if that makes any goddamn sense. Another thing I loved and was surprised by was the music. I normally don't pay much attention to the soundtracks of shows, but Edgerunner had some really standout music, especially the opening song, This Fire. I didn't expect music like this in an anime, but it was a pleasant surprise that helped set this show apart from other anime I've seen in the past. Just listen to this part from episode 1 to see what I mean. There's so much to unpack with Edgerunners. It's packed full of great scenes and writing, so much so I could never even talk about it all in one video. The show's filled with tons of depth and heart. Even the ending, which I'll talk a bit about ahead, is hauntingly beautiful in a somber kind of way. If I had any complaint about Edgerunners, it was that some of the characters, besides Lucy and David, weren't really given enough time to be explored. For example, we see this one bit with Maine, alluding to his past, I presume, but we don't learn much more. But even he gets more exploration than, say, characters like Kiwi or Pilar. There's even hints towards the end of the show about Kiwi having some history with one of the bad guys, but it's never revealed. Obviously, with only 10 episodes, you're not going to be able to dive too deep with a large cast of characters, but even a little bit would have been nice. And the only other issue I had certainly does not count against the show, as it's not as if it was done poorly or executed terribly, but I really hated the ending. If you want, please skip ahead to avoid some more spoilers. It's sad as hell, and it left me feeling super depressed afterwards. From the start, I so wanted David to have a happy ending to his story, but as the show went on, I kept getting the feeling that Edgerunners was not going to be that type of show. He fought for other people's dreams, despite never having one of his own, and he died for it, so his friends could get away, so that Lucy could go to the moon and achieve her dream. It's a bitter finale to an otherwise breathtaking show, and despite all that, I would still recommend it because I think it's worth it. And that's all I have to say on Cyberpunk Edgerunners. This was a really great show to watch. It was very challenging to write this review because I have yet to do a full season review of anything before. I've normally stuck to doing episodic reviews if you've watched any of my videos in the past. So it was very difficult to somehow try to like compile everything that I've seen in these 10 episodes into one video. And I'm very open to any criticisms about this video. This is the first instance I've done of a big review like this. So, you know, I'm willing to learn. Eventually I will do another video like this and review an entire season or something. And I want to make sure that I get it right. So if there's any spots where you thought I could have, you know, filled you guys in on more of the show, please let me know. I'd appreciate it. And now, if you've seen Edgerunners, please chime in below with your opinions on it or your favorite characters. I have a feeling that a lot of people really liked Rebecca, at least going by my Twitter timeline. And if you want to see more reviews like this, please subscribe. I will be doing maybe another video on Cyberpunk Edgerunners if this video does well enough. And of course, Halloween's coming up next month, so I'm already starting to hash out what kind of like spooky reviews I'm going to do. So if you want to watch that, please consider becoming a member or just subscribing in general. Alright, I think that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. What do you get when you cross Batman with Pixar's Cars? You get Batwheels, a new show out on HBO Max right now. Move over, Batman, there's a new team of crime fighters in Gotham, and they're your own vehicles. Yes, you heard me correctly. Batwheels is less about the old Cape Crusader himself, and more about his cars. At least his first episode is. I haven't watched the rest of the show. When word of this first leaked online, I was right there with everyone thinking, what in the heck is this? Had Warner Brothers finally run out of ideas? It is an odd concept, even for a franchise where there's a Bat Dog and Bat Cow. It's quite literally just Batman meets cars, just with more superheroes instead of racing. Secret Origin of the Batwheels, the premiere episode of the new show, is literally just what the title suggests, the hush-hush origins of this new team. The plot kicks off with Batman and his allies giving chase to Joker, Penguin, Riddler, Harley, and Mr. Freeze. Some of the designs are silly but clever, owing to the audience that this show is obviously aiming for, like Mr. Freeze with his ice cube head. Others are just a little bit off. Joker looks more like one of the Jokers than the clown prince of crime himself. More noticeable differences include both Freeze and I think Riddler being race-swapped, which, funny enough, kind of makes Freeze's blue lips stand out even more, almost like he's wearing lipstick instead of presumably what's meant to be frostbitten lips. The other changes are, of course, seen with Robin and Batgirl. This show's version is Duke Thomas, who in the comics was the Signal, though he did have a brief stint as Robin in the comic book We Are Robin, which I think is honestly a better solution than if they decided to race swap Dick or Tim or something. So it's cool seeing Duke Thomas being the choice. I just wish he'd gotten a better Robin costume in the show. The one that we see isn't bad, it just reminds me way too much of Damien's, and I think designing something more unique to Duke, maybe invoking the colors from his Signal costume, would have been much better. The show also opts out of using Barbara as Batgirl again, and instead has Cassandra Cain, who is, honestly, one of my favorite Batgirls from the comics. Unfortunately, they made the mystifying decision to dress her in a costume from one of the worst eras of Batgirl, Barbara's Burnside outfit. And it actually does get worse, as without her helmet on, it looks like she's just wearing a cheap pair of ears she bought at a Dollar General. I'm not sure why they went with Cass, and then steered clear of any costume that she's ever worn. I don't know, maybe it was too scary for kids. I'd like to think that there were other better ways to get around that. And not to get too nitpicky, but personality-wise, she isn't written much like Cass at all. She's more like Barbara, if I had to take a guess. After Batman and his sidekicks are unceremoniously trapped following their latest victory over several of Gotham's notorious criminals, the Bat-computer brings Batman's car to life to fend off an intruder who somehow knows where the Batcave is. I remember getting this part in the episode and wondering why the Batcave doesn't have any other tricks or safety measures in place should someone break in that don't involve bringing to life Batman's car. That oddity aside, Bam, short for Batmobile, is born. Sorta. He seems somewhat previously aware of Batman and of having been a car, but then that would imply having had a consciousness prior to being given a forget it, never mind, it's too confusing. Bam does end up defending Batman's cave, and then goes to track down the living crash test dummy, aptly called Crash, to a junkyard, where we get to see what I can only assume is the big bad of the series. At first, I was thinking this villain was someone fans might recognize from the comics, like Brainiac or something, but no, he is an original character to the show. Bad Computer. You get it? Like Bat Computer, but he's bad, so he's Bad Computer. It's dumb, but it's also for 4-year-olds, so I don't really care. He brings to life the earlier villains' vehicles, and thus the League of Zoom is born. And even they think that's a dumb name, which I thought was pretty funny. There's also a Zoomer joke in there somewhere, but I am too lazy to think of one, so you guys figure one out. As a group of villains go, I do kind of like them. Name aside, I think the relationship and banter between Bad Computer and Crash is legit funny, and I could see why kids might get a laugh out of it. It is still too soon to see if the villain vehicles are going to be any good, though, as they don't get as much time to shine in Episode 1. The same kind of goes for Batwheels themselves. Basically, we get a brief glimpse at their general personalities, and then we keep on rolling. When the two groups do face off, at the end of the episode, we see a very, very familiar trope. The good guys losing, and only starting to turn the tide by swapping enemies. It's been done hundreds of times, just trust me on that because I'm too lazy right now to search up examples. But it isn't enough to criticize the episode for, in my personal opinion. And it does allow for some cool action sequences, and that's one thing the show seems really set on doing well. Which brings me to my next point. The show's CG is gorgeous. Leave it to Warner Brothers, of course, to have even their cartoons for preschoolers look amazing. My video might not show that off very well, since I ended up getting my hands on a lower quality file off the internet, but on HBO Max's official site, it is stunning to look at. The roads are reflective with water, the cars all have a nice sheen to them, and the character models are really pleasant to look at. It's just a really nice looking show, and it clearly had a lot of effort put into its presentation. Now, plot-wise, and since I've only seen an episode, I can't say much, it's decent. Like, I'm not expecting a grand story from something meant for a 5-year-old, so my expectations were lowered accordingly. It's only episode 1, like I said, so it's very basic in its setup. Bam comes alive, he learns to be his own hero, not just imitating Batman, and he helps save Batman from Bad Computer. There's not too much else to dissect there. Honestly, in terms of the writing, I think the silliest thing, besides just the concept for the show in general, is just Bat Computer's insistence that the cars keep all of this a secret from Batman. I really don't get why that has to be. Like, what's he gonna do? Remove their chips and force them to be unalive again? Maybe, but that's not really explained in the episode, so it just seems like an odd writing decision to have them operate in secret. Moving on to the voice actors, I think they all do a pretty good job of portraying these classic comic book characters, especially Hawk as Batman. I'm glad he finally got to be Batman after apparently either not getting the role or turning it down for an earlier Batman film. And even with odd design choices, whomever is voicing Joker certainly does live up to the other voice actors before him. Maybe not on the same level as, say, Hamill, but I think he does good. And Harley's voice actors actually surprised me, because I thought it was like legit Tara Strong reprising her role, but no, it's a new lady, and I think she does a pretty good job. And other than what I've mentioned so far, I've no serious complaints about the show. Some design decisions are a little irksome to me, but the show seems fun. Nothing I think I'll want to keep watching on my own time. I mean, maybe if I'm bored, I'll turn it on. But what about you? Do you have a kid or maybe a younger family member like a niece or nephew who forced you to watch the show? Or maybe you just see it on your own time just to see what it's like? What are your thoughts on it? Share any of your opinions on it down below. Hope you all have a great New Year's. Stay safe and take care.
Yeah, this whole limo thing was pretty sus.
I have no idea what you just said.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Grease is the word sees the gang vacationing in Greece, only to be stuck in your chamber with a descending ceiling trap straight out of Resident Evil. The only solution is in a scroll Velma finds that tells the tale of an ancient Greek version of our characters. Yes, that's right. We're going back in time to ancient Greece, a time of great scholars, fierce warriors, and terrible monsters. The entire episode is set in ancient Greece, similar to how Scroogey-Doo was set in a different time period, 1843 London. Normally, I'm not a fan of these kinds of episodes. It's hard to become invested in stories within a story since it doesn't usually matter to the show or the episode as a whole. I even groaned a little when I realized that this is what this episode was going to be about, but I have to say the episode won me over pretty quickly because of the usual Beagle Scooby-Doo writing and humor. The Greek mystery gang come together as a result of Arachne, wreaking havoc to stop a wedding between Valmonia and the prince, which would strengthen both cities. In this era, Velma is a princess of Athens, Daphne is her servant, Fred is a warrior, Shaggy, or Shagrates, is a scholar, while old Scooby-Doo himself is, surprise, an oracle. Immediately, each of the roles in this story set up a lot of jokes, which has always been the show's strength. There's Daphne collapsing in this scene at the start of the episode.
Here she is now.
Shaggy passing on his knowledge to the younger generation, but it's all about food. Or even the reveal of who the Oracle really is.
Aha! The great all-seeing Oracle is really a dog.
There's so many noteworthy comedic scenes in this one episode alone, it's crazy. I might even hazard as to claim it's the funniest episode yet. The best moment being, for me, Shaggy and Scoob as Zeus and Hera. I had a huge grin on my face while this whole scene played out. There's just something about how long it's drawn out that adds to its hilarity. It's just gold. And the chase scene music for this episode was a real banger, and was so good I had to rewatch the chase scene because I got distracted listening to the song.
We gotta change your life, practice science,
It kind of reminded me a little bit of the music from What's New Scooby-Doo, specifically the theme song by Simple Plan. It really makes me wish that they would release a soundtrack for this show so everyone could enjoy it, but I doubt that's ever going to happen. And even though I said I dislike period piece/flashback episodes or whatever style this kind of episode is, I will admit the writing is outstanding, beyond just the comedy mentioned earlier. Velma struggling with her duties as a princess, despite not wanting to marry someone she doesn't love, was intriguing, and Daphne's constant reminders of being forced into servitude were funny, though admittedly did get tiresome at times. And I thought it was a bit different that instead of Velma deciding to run away after all, she realized that although she didn't want this marriage, if she shirked her responsibilities, her city would suffer. I know, it's a Scooby-Doo cartoon, and it's not that deep. But usually modern stories opt for the type of princesses who throw away their duties, even if it ends up hurting other people, so it was a nice change of pace, in my opinion. Oh, I almost forgot to talk about the monster for the episode, Arachne. I adored the design for the monster. She really felt creepy, as most spiders are. I would not want to find her chilling out in the corner of my room, that's for sure. Though I know some of you freaks would absolutely love that. Maybe it's just the concept of a giant spider with the upper body of a woman chasing you, but she really gave off intimidating vibes. Like, she could have really hurt them if she wanted to. Also, she shot webs out like Spider-Man does, from his wrist. That's neat. The inspiration for this character is, of course, the Greek mythological figure herself. According to the tale, she challenged Minerva, goddess of wisdom and crafts, to a sewing contest, basically. But so enraged by the lack of flaws in Arachne's tapestry, Minerva beat the woman with a shuttle. No, not that kind of shuttle. And it led to the girl hanging herself out of shame. Then she became a spider. You know, as one does after you hang yourself. Of course, none of that is alluded to in the episode, because that'd be a bit too dark for Beagle Scooby-Doo, but it'd have been kind of neat to see some reference to who Arachne really was. And not really related to the episode at all, but I kind of find it amusing that I just played a game featuring a character named after Arachne where they did recount the myth, and then I watched this episode. Life's full of coincidences. The twist as to who the spider monster is was only something I partially figured out, the other aspect actually taking me by surprise. It's not an unusual twist, but it worked within the context of the episode, and I liked it. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen the episode yet, so, go watch it if you want to see what I'm talking about. This episode, in my opinion, was a real joy to watch, and I'm glad that it was the one episode I ended up reviewing as the first video I did on my return to the channel. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you do. It's all on HBO Max, and if you have seen it, let me know what you thought of the episode down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care.
Well, at least we solved the mystery.
I'm hungry.
Like I could go for a really big pita.
Guys?
Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. It's funny that after 2 years of having this movie's file sitting on my computer, I finally sat down and watched it. That's how bad I tend to procrastinate on doing these videos.
Now let's see how it looks so far. The time.
If you're new, you'll learn this very quickly. So, now that I've gone and finally seen Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo, what do I have to say on it? Well, it's a weird movie.
Then we chew it to produce a sticky resin, thusly.
Why is it weird? Well, I'll tell you. In order of weird, the least weirdest thing about the movie is Elvira. Yes, the Elvira is in this movie. If you're younger than 30, you might not know of her. She's an old school horror movie hostess, as well as star of her own films and comics. It's not that odd because this isn't the first time she's appeared in the Scooby-Doo movies, though I think it's her first full appearance, at least as Elvira. There was that Lego Scooby-Doo movie where she shows up as Drella. See my review of that film if you're interested in that. She plays a bit of a mentor role to Daphne in Happy Halloween, more or less using her to carry her equipment, or even possibly be bait for the monsters. You'd think a celebrity cameo would distract from the movie's plot, but honestly, I enjoyed Elvira here. She's like Spider-Man, always quipping.
Wow, you're a regular Mary Sue.
But easier on the eyes. She and Daphne play really well off each other, especially with how zany Daphne is this go-around. More on that in a bit. Then you've got Scarecrow, one of many villains that Batman has to contend with in his series. You might know him more from the early Christian Bale Batman films, or maybe even that Gotham show. His whole shtick is basically fear toxin. He's here too, which is weird, but not too weird since the Scooby Gang have teamed up with Batman before, so it makes sense Crane would exist in the Scooby-Doo universe. He's honestly fantastic in this movie. Dwight Schultz, also voice of Dr. Animo in Ben 10, really sells the character's creepy presence. You'd think with Scooby not being all that serious a franchise, maybe he turned out to be a bit of a joke, but no, he's been done justice. And in a Scooby movie of all things. There's so many scenes that he outright steals in the movie, from cracking Velma's confidence, capturing him, to him not knowing about the jack-o'-lanterns,
What?
to this amazing scene.
There is no time for bravery! Run!
The writers absolutely nailed Scarecrow, something that not all Batman writers even managed to do. And the fact he wasn't just briefly in the prologue and gone again is also amazing. Next up in weird is Daphne. You all know Daphne. She's the gorgeous, ginger, sometimes genius fashionista of Mystery Incorporated. Contrary to what Velma's showrunners would have you believe, she's got character, and plenty of it. But this is probably the strangest iteration of Daphne there is. If you haven't watched Be Cool Scooby-Doo, that is. I remember hearing about this back when the movie first came out in 2020. Supposedly, one of the writers, or someone from Be Cool Scooby-Doo worked on the movie, and wrote Daphne more like her Be Cool version. Hence, explaining all the wacky as hell things she says and does in the movie. Like this.
This is what we do. Word.
Or even this.
We've always solved mysteries, and we always will. Nothing but net.
I'll say what I thought back then. I love Be Cool Scooby-Doo, but I'm not sold on Be Cool's version continuing past that iteration. It was a great twist on an already great character, but I'm still fond of classic Daphne too. And so it was definitely jarring to see regular Daphne act like Be Cool Daphne for over an hour. And weirdly, despite loving that version of the character, I found it to grind on my nerves a little. Maybe it's just the dissonance of seeing the classic design versus the Be Cool Scooby-Doo Daphne personality. That said, it was only irritating for a little bit. That's not to say it didn't stop being weird, but Daphne has plenty of brilliant moments throughout the film. Badass moments, cute moments, crazy moments like what even?
Wait, were you just trying to replace Elvira and take over her life?
She's done this before.
And whatever this scene was supposed to mean.
Have you ever done circus work? You know, like getting shot out of a cannon, wrestling a bear, breathing fire.
Not officially for a circus. No.
So, while it was weird, much like Be Cool Scooby-Doo itself, you eventually grow used to it and develop a fondness for this bizarre version. And also, not to perv out or anything, but there's the reveal that Daphne and Elvira swap clothes while driving, which means, well, I'll let you imagine that scene. So, what was the weirdest, take a shot for every use of the word weird in this video, moment in Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo for me? Fucking Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Why was he in this movie? The only thing I could think of was his show came back a few years ago, right? So maybe that's the relevance of his being in this movie? Or him having an episode in Guess Who? I don't know, but it was a strange choice. His role is essentially helping the gang out by giving them a new ride, delivering some science facts, and then he vanishes a little from the movie.
Hang on 1 second.
Wait, what? Mr. Nye?
They could have used anyone else for his character, and I think it still would have made more sense. But moving on, some standout moments of note is this little acknowledgement of Fred and Daphne's relationship.
My love!
No, Daphne made it out with Elvira. They're right up ahead.
Granted, they took that and made it a weird thing about the van, but us Fred-Daphne shippers take what we can get. And before I end off the video, there were a couple of other weird moments in the movie, but those turned out to just be references, like Fred ripping his shirt off and setting traps. A super bizarre scene that had me rolling my eyes until I learned it's referencing Predator. Or this line from Velma.
Mr. Nye, get us out of here! Ludicrous speed, engage!
That's referencing Spaceballs and Star Trek. To wrap up with some final thoughts on the movie, I think, while certainly one of the oddest Scooby-Doo movies there's been, it somehow managed to take all those haphazard, random elements and turn it into something fun. Hell, it even wrapped up a running storyline from the past 3 films with the sheriff character in an almost unbelievable way. No, seriously, even for a Scooby-Doo fan, I found it very contrived. Glow sticks? Come on. But at least his storyline is over because he was really starting to annoy me. And I believe that's all I have to say on Happy Halloween Scooby-Doo. It was a fun movie, filled with weirdness, but it worked. But what about you? Did you see it back when it came out? Leave a comment below on what you liked or disliked about it. Thanks for watching, and take care.
I don't want to be you, silly. Just to look and think like you, but still have free will.